Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Warkings, Armageddon, out July 4th on Napalm Records. This album has 14 tracks, 40 minutes in length, and this is the band's 5th full-length studio album. They are a German-Austrian power metal band. Now, when it comes to the design of this record, I have no doubts in my mind. This is the best design, overall structure that I've seen from a Warkings record, with a clear sense of beginning, middle, and end, and really defining how you're going to take the listener along for the ride, along for the journey. And there are certain elements that really help define this experience and give this album a more mature, a more rich, a better conceived album design. The first are the interludes. Now, this might seem minuscule in the big scheme of things, but the interludes on this record play two important roles in my opinion. The first role is to create context for the song that follows. It also helps with the atmosphere of the track and helps elevate what the storytelling aspect of that song is all about. And I think that's always important. Anytime you can place or you can help place a story better, creating a visual behind it, you're always going to make the song come to life a lot easier. And these interludes really do that. The other aspect of the interludes that I feel like it's really important is that it breaks the record. So instead of having song in and song out, song in and song out, throwing in an interlude that has more of an atmospheric impact and an impact on setting up what the lyrical context of the next song is, slows down the album, breaks the routines of the album, breaks the monotony of the album. It allows the listener to reset and re-engage. And I think that's an important aspect specifically for a power metal album in order to really keep the listener connected, engaged, and feel like there are more up and down movement throughout the record, not just forward movement. So the interludes really play two important roles in my mind in setting up the design of the album. Another aspect of the design of this record that I think it's really important, but it might come across just as a nuance and not more than that, is that this record features 3 songs with guest singers in them. And the way they place those songs throughout the record, once again, allows you to have different dynamics. It allows you to have different songs, different styles, different approach with different textures within them. Once again, breaking the monotony of the record, breaking the linearity of the record. So it's really important where you place not only the songs that feature a different singer, but also the songs that are led by an interlude. This way you're breaking up the record constantly. The album has a lot more stops and goes, allowing you to re-engage with the record more frequently, and also giving you a sense that every song is unique. Every song is different. Every song has its own DNA. So the album doesn't allow these tracks to kind of all blend together, and by the time you reach the end of the record, you can't really tell the forest from the trees because everything just sounded like one big song. The album does a phenomenal job really giving each individual track its own space to breathe. As far as the sound on the album is concerned, this is a very rich, big sounding record, but it uses all of the elements that power metal has had and currently has. And what I mean by that is that there are certain songs on this album that definitely have more of an old school power metal sound to them. And that could be easily attached to how driven and how impactful the guitar sound is throughout the entire record. But in songs where the guitars really feel like the dominant force, and you start to bring in a lot of guitar melodies with some really old school solos, those tracks completely create a different dynamic, create a different perspective as far as the genre is concerned, and take you back in time when power metal was predominantly driven by heavy guitars, by a guitar sound that becomes the cornerstone of the foundation of the tracks themselves, and obviously with great drum sound behind it in order to illustrate better that drive, that push, and even that heaviness that the guitars have. Then you also have songs on this record that rely heavily on a more keys, synth, sound driven experience in order not just to create melody, but also to create a more theatrical aspect, which enhances the storytelling. Anytime you have that more theatrical sound behind a track that has a heavy story or a heavy connection to a story, the story becomes a lot better because it becomes more vivid, it comes alive. And this album also has a lot of that. So it's a record that sound-wise does not find one single formula or one single approach, and relies heavily on that formula, on that approach beginning to end. And I've seen a lot of that on Warkings records, where they want to have more of a predominant guitar sound, then every single song is going to have more of a dominant guitar sound. This record, it almost feels like they took the best elements from the previous 4 albums and brought them all together under one single umbrella. Understanding that power metal within itself, it's a very diverse genre. It has a lot of different opportunities for you to create different experiences. You can create a more traditional power metal sound, you can create a more symphonic power metal sound, a more fantasy theatrical power metal sound. There's just a lot that you can do within that genre without necessarily breaking away from it. And this album, I feel like it really dove deep into all of those subgenres underneath the power metal umbrella, bringing them all to the table, still giving a lot of emphasis on the guitar sound. The guitar sound on this record is phenomenal. The solos, the melodies, the leads, how heavy it is at times, how driven. So the guitar sound on this album still plays a very important, I would say, fundamental role, but it's not the driving force behind each and every single song. Knowing when to push it forward, when to move it back, really allows this album to have a lot more life, and therefore to have a much richer sound all around. The drums really help emphasize the depth of the songs, the thickness of the songs, but they never overpower the guitars or even any of the other elements. They're there to create a more consistent, a more robust experience, but not necessarily overshadow any of the other elements. It always comes down to where the guitars are, the overall sound, the keys, the melodies that comes from it, and then how you operate these elements, moving them around in order to create different textures on a track-by-track basis. When it comes to the vocals on this album really surprised me, because they went down a path that I was not expecting them to go. But I think it's a path that's really important to take at times. The first thing that I thought was really interesting about this record was giving Morgana her own kind of a song. Like Circle of Witches is really her track, and I hadn't really seen the secondary vocalist on any of the Warkings album have as much predominance on a single track as she has on that one. So therefore, right from the get-go, just on that alone, I thought that was an interesting caveat, that was an interesting change, and it was a welcome one, because it's about serving the song with the best vocals possible, not necessarily going with one size fits all. The other aspect I mentioned already earlier are the featured tracks with guest vocalists. I'm not necessarily always a huge fan of that, and definitely I'm not a huge fan when it's overused on an album unless there is a concept behind it. But on this album, really helped give songs a unique touch, a unique experience, and therefore separating these tracks from one another while still finding some connecting points in between them, which gives great quality and great strength to the overall record. The standard, if you will, for lack of a better term, vocals on a Warkings album are always great. The vocal delivery, the tonality, the power, the drive, the experience, it's there on this album. But when you add all of these outside elements, on top of that, this album has a lot of backing vocals, a lot of choirs, which adds to the theatrical aspect of the album. You have a vocal performance on record that matches the size and volume of the sound behind it. To me, when you bring these two worlds together, you have the perfect formula to create a memorable record. And in my opinion, this is the band's most memorable record since the debut album, Reborn. I still am a huge fan of that debut record. I think that is a phenomenal debut album, one that they're always going to have to live up to, but this record is up there with it. Great album by Warkings. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I picked 3 very different tracks, starting off with Kingdom Come. I gotta say, man, this song reminded me of Sabaton. It reminded me of Bismarck. It has some of those elements, some Sabatonian elements, specifically in the verses, where the verses are a little bit more methodic, more vocally driven, with the sound behind it emphasizing the vocal delivery. And then once you get into the chorus has so much size, so much volume, so much power, both musically and vocally. It's really a big sounding chorus, and everything really helps you set up that chorus perfectly, making it as bombastic as possible. It's a track that has phenomenal guitar sound. It has a really classic touch as far as the guitars are concerned in the solo and the way they come across. This track really merges a more modern power metal sound with a more classic power metal, heavy metal sound, mixing the two perfectly with that Sabatonian vibe. This is one of my favorite songs by far on this album. Then you have Troops of Immortality. Definitely a guitar focused and a guitar driven song. The backing vocals on this track add size to the song, it adds size to the overall vocal performance, and the drums really help as far as the overall depth of the track is concerned. The chorus jumps out, very common on a Warkings record, songs to have a very emphasized chorus. This one is just that, super catchy, both musically and vocally. I love how the backing vocals operate on this track, and I love what they offer the song, specifically in that chorus, really emphasizing a lot of the elements of that chorus, giving the track impact, size, really a flourish of energy coming from it. And once again, very guitar focused, very guitar driven, very guitar centric track all around. Last but definitely not least, Nightfall. Now this track has a little bit more of a different guitar sound to it. The tonality on this track has given you a little bit more of a warmer guitar presence. It allows you to build through the vocals, and that I think it's an important aspect because it climaxes at the chorus, but you definitely see the development through the verses. So there is growth within the verses. It's not like the verses are stagnated. There is a sense of evolution, and then even from one verse to the next verse, you also see an evolution in sound and growth and size. So it's a track that's always building towards a climax, and it's always building differently because it builds up through the first verse, then it builds upon that in the second verse, but always with that goal of reaching the peak of the mountain once you get to that chorus, and that chorus is the payout. And I love the consistency that the chorus offers versus the inconsistency and growth of the verses. Very interesting dynamic track. This is it. This is Warkings with Armageddon, once again on July 4th. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the record. Hit me up in the comment section. I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.